Sometimes I'm right and I can be wrong. My own beliefs are in my song. The butcher, the banker, the drummer, and then makes no difference what group I'm in. I'm everyday people. There is a blue one who can't accept the green one, but living with a fat one, trying to be a skinny one. Different strokes for different folks, and so on and so on, and Scooby-Dooby-Doo. We got to live together. I am no better, and neither are you. We are the same, whatever we do. You love me, you hate me, you know me, and then you can't figure out what bag I'm in. I am everyday people. There is a long hair who can't accept the short hair of being such a rich one. They can't accept the poor one. Different strokes for different folks, and so on and so on, and Scooby-Dooby-Doo. We got to live together. So on and so on, and Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Them everyday people.
Welcome. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and serve the community. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, you are welcome here. Whomever you love, you are welcome here. All of you is welcome here. It is good to be together this morning. We acknowledge with respect the Seneca Nation, keepers of the Western Door and part of the Haudenosaunee people, on whose ancestral lands our church, First Universalist, now stands. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you either in person or on Zoom. We do have a visitor's form that can be found in the Zoom chat and in your printed order of service. Please fill it out so that we can offer you a welcome beyond this service. As we gather this morning, we want to invite everyone to offer a greeting to those around you. For those participating via Zoom, you can find the chat at the top or the bottom of the screen and an icon of a text bubble and the word chat in it. So please pop on over there and offer a greeting. It could be a wave of a hello, or I'm here, or whatever you prefer. And if you're in person, you may turn to each other now and just say good morning. There's no chat bubble. Welcome to worship. And now, let us join our hearts and voices in singing together this morning, recognizing that even as some of us are muted in our own homes, we are all creating a song across the city of Rochester, the country, and the world. Let us sing together number hymn 38, Morning has broken.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rains to fall, sun wind from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the red garden, sprung in completeness, where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, even someday. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
It is said that ministers are here to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. I say we are all afflicted and we are all comfortable. May our time together this morning be a comfort and a confrontation. May we here find peace in times of tumult. May we here invite tumult into lives of peace. May we here find calm in times of rest. May we here also, may we here allow restlessness to evolve into action. Let this be the place you consider what you've never considered. Let this be the place you imagine for yourself something new and unthinkable. May this hour bring dreams of new ways of being in the world. Come, let us worship together. As Peter House lights the chalice, will you join me in saying our chalice words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please join me in our affirmation of faith, followed by our doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. Our offering words for this morning is Generosity of Spirit by Victoria Weinstein. The purpose
of the church is to encourage all who gather there to grow more generous in spirit and action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will support this self-supporting church and its many ministries. Here in person and on Zoom, we invite you to give to the First Universalist Church. For those joining us via Zoom, a link can be found in the chat now. You can also, of course, send a check in the physical mail. The offering will be given and greatly received.
From a distance, the world looks blue and green, and the snow-capped mountains white. From a distance, the ocean meets the stream, and the eagle takes to flight. From a distance, there is harmony, and it goes through the land. It's the hope of hopes, it's the love of loves, it's the heart of every man. From a distance, you look like my friend, even though we are at war. From a distance, I just cannot comprehend what all this fighting is for. From a distance, there is harmony, and it goes through the land. It's the hope of hopes, it's the love of loves, it's the heart of every man. God is watching us. God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance. Oh, God is watching us. God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance.
I invite you, both in person and at home, to enter into this reverent time of the sharing of joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from a heart-centered place. As Jacob places stones in the bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of the community gathered here, and those at home will put them in the chat. All are invited to share their joys and sorrows in the chat, and some of you have shared them here. Let us hear from all of the community gathered here, both virtually and in person. A joy from Patty Goodwin. We enjoyed our granddaughters this past week. The little one asked me to play my flute for her. First time that happened. A joy from Newcomb Lash. This weekend, Ed Deller's mom seemed to happily settle into assisted care facility in Pennsylvania. He is there now with her and his brothers. From Pam Jacobson, a joy. After a week of vacation with all my children and families, I spent another week with my son's new daughter in California, who I knew could still play monkey in the middle in a pod. I'm being reminded afresh of my need for Bible. From Eileen, a joy. My great-granddaughter, Gio, is stable, but still in the hospital. The doctors assure us that she will be fine, but it will take some time. A sorrow from Beth Ayers. One of the girls attending Rural and Migrant Ministry Summer Day Camp lost her mother Thursday to cancer. A joy from Emma Berry. Joy to be celebrating 2.5 years working at First Universalist. So glad to be with you all. Best joy ever. I have to say too, in the couple of summers that we've been working together, it's a great joy to work with them. And we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love. Just going to take a second here to rearrange things. Oh, I see. Okay. So you're seeing the reason, and I will admit this, that my husband literally has to hammer, like I can't hammer a nail in it, won't go in the wall when I do it. So I'm really that bad with technology. I just have to look through here for the. For Melissa Parrish, my son is enjoying his volunteer work at Homesteads for Hope Community Farm. Thank you, Kitty Forbush, for volunteering with him. His smile says it all. I invite you now to enter into a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, We are living in a time when we all feel we must watch and weigh our every word and gesture. Never before has the risk of unintentionally offending been so great. At times, it feels as if simply staying silent is the safest choice. But there is too much pain, too much injustice, and too much suffering in the world for us to take refuge in that safe choice. The world needs our just speech and our unique perspectives. May we this morning covenant together to speak our truths as gently and respectfully as we can. And let us also covenant to listen with open and generous and compassionate hearts, listening and looking for nuance and looking for the good intentions being expressed, even when some of the words might rankle. In a world full of misunderstanding and pain, let us all covenant together to be agents of unity and models of compassion. And to this, let us say together, amen. A conversation can be a contest or a game of catch with invisible balloons. They bounce between us, growing and shrinking, sometimes floating like cloud medicine balls, and sometimes bowling at us like round anvils. You toss a phrase and understanding balloons like an anemone of colored light. My mind fireworks with unasked questions. Who is this miracle speaking to? And who is this miracle listening? What amazingness are we creating together? Out of gray matter, a star spark of thought leaps between synapses into the air and pours through gray matter into my heart. How can I not listen generously? I have to acknowledge how great it is after over a year for me to be doing a service in person. I missed it greatly. All last summer, I was Zooming from my dining room, I think, if I recall. And then this summer, I've been alone in the sanctuary. And all during the school year, I've been Zooming from my dining room once a month for the congregation in East Aurora. So I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be here in person. So like everyone, I have enjoyed being able to get together with people in person a little bit this spring after over a year of social distancing. Earlier this summer, a good friend of mine had a get together outdoors, that is, for vaccinated people. So I saw lots of people that I'd only experienced through a computer screen for over a year. I fell into conversation with a man that I've known for many, many years. We've been involved in several progressive organizations over the years, and we often have political conversations when we see each other. John is smart, he is well-read, and extremely involved in local social justice work. He is someone I really respect. John has been active in promoting the need for the Police Accountability Board, and he was very anxious to talk to me about that topic. So, if you can't hear, let me know. And I'll try to remember to keep an eye on it. So I need to be clear before I go any further that I support 100% the Police Accountability Board. I was among the 75%, I believe it was, of Rochester City residents that voted yes to establish this board in 2019. I encouraged my friends and neighbors to vote yes on it. Like so many of us, I have been outraged and horrified by cases of police killings of innocent people of color. And I have been openly critical of policing practices in communities of color. Last year, like so many of us, I attended protests and I supported the actions of the organizations that were taking a stand on this important issue. My friend John, with whom I was speaking at the party, knows this. In the past few years, we've discussed it several times. He and I, over the years, nearly always agree on the big points. However, as is natural and human and necessary, we often differ a little bit when we get into the details. So I listened to John talk for several minutes as he discussed everything that he knew about the progress that this board was making. I learned a lot of details that I didn't know. And I was pleased to hear about the progress that was being made. He did take two positions that I didn't completely agree with. And when it was my turn to talk, I thought, gently and politely, pointed out that I had a slightly different take on a few of the details that he mentioned. One of the things that John said was that he believed that all of the police officers' personnel records should be available to the public online. How many sick days they use, exactly what the days were used for, all of that stuff should be available to the public, he said. We pay their salaries and we have a right to know this stuff. So when it was my turn to talk, I told John that I didn't agree with him on this point. In my opinion, I believe that it would be a huge violation of the officer's privacy. We all have a right to privacy around these sorts of issues. And I can't really see any valid reason why members of the public need access to that very sensitive and utterly personal information. So I told John my feelings on this topic. And I could see that he was quite agitated. It clearly bothered him a lot that we weren't in total alignment on this issue. So at the beginning, I had mentioned that I disagreed with two details. So after he heard me out on that issue, he said with quite a bit of irritation, I could tell. So you said you disagree with 2 points. So what's the second one? So John, while he was talking, had said that he was very angry that the court had sided with the police union on the issue of officer discipline. As most people who have followed this issue know, the Accountability Board is seeking the right to discipline officers directly when they find their actions unacceptable. Now, the courts have said that this would be a violation of the Taylor Law, which is the law that governs all of the public employee collective bargaining agreements. So briefly, what this law states is that disciplinary practices for public employees must be negotiated with unions as part of the contract negotiation process. So I told John that as a former teacher union president, I had to agree with the decision of the court on this point. I told John that if a city or a school district had wanted to circumvent the teacher union contract and appoint a group of citizens to unilaterally discipline teachers that it believed were guilty of wrongdoing, I would have had to, in my role as a union president, fight that policy change vigorously and stridently. I also pointed out to him that that could set a precedent that could potentially strip all public employees in New York State of a very important collective bargaining right. This wouldn't only affect police officers, I told him. It could harm teachers, teacher aides, nurses, nurses aides, toll collectors, DMV clerks, maintenance workers, and on and on and on the list goes, including lots of people who make low wages and don't have any power other than what is in that union contract that they have. All employees in the state could potentially lose their right to a fairly negotiated disciplinary practice if the court had set that precedent. Now, what I do believe is that the board can put pressure on both sides to have a voice in those negotiations. So by the time I was done explaining this, my friend John was absolutely seething with anger in a way that was really quite obvious to me. He was, when someone is so angry, you can see them trembling a little bit. So I saw this trembling. And in fact, he didn't even let me quite finish what I was saying before he blurted out. So you're telling me that everything is fine just the way it is. So you're okay with what happened to George Floyd. I admit I was stunned. I have known this man for many years, and he has known me as well. He had seen many Facebook posts from me supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, and he had seen many others in which I had clearly condemned the unjust murder of innocent people by the police. And I had been so careful, I thought anyway, to present a carefully nuanced argument in which I did, just as I did for all of you just now, make it clear that yes, I agree, I see urgent need for immediate and drastic police reform. I was careful to point out to him that I had voted for the establishment of the Police Accountability Board, and that I was absolutely not in any conceivable way okay with what had happened to George Floyd or Daniel Cruz or Breonna Taylor, or with any of the shamefully long list of cases where people had been murdered by the police. I tried to explain this, but John wasn't having any of it. Come on, man, he said. He's one of these people that calls you man. Come on, man, he said. Your dad was a cop. That's really what this is about, isn't it? You're a closet thin blue line guy. Why can't you just come out and admit it? So again, I was stunned. In telling him that I did not believe that the personnel records of the police officers should be put online so that the public can peruse them, I had mentioned the fact that my father had been a police officer who had, at the very young age of 36, suffered a massive heart attack in the line of duty. He used up all of his sick time and then some during a very long recovery. And I did not think that it would have been fair to him to allow people from the public to see all of his sick time use and other details related to his illness. My father was born at a time when men were expected to be able to just talk through illnesses, push through it, and get back to work. And he experienced this heart attack as a huge failure. And he also saw it as a huge failing on his part, a personal and almost moral failing, that he ended up having to be on disability and was unable to work. My father was also a very private person, and this information having been made public would have caused him a great deal of distress. I explained this to John, yes, in my discussion of the issue, but I had not made any statement. I had not made any statement in which I voiced any kind of support for the thin blue line movement or the back the blue movement. And for the record, I will state again that I do not support these groups in any way. And in my discussion of the disciplinary policy, I had been very careful to talk about the implications it could have for teachers and other public sector workers. And I did state that I feel police reform is urgently needed. I said that to him several times. I did what I thought was a decent job of presenting nuanced arguments, making it clear that while John and I were in nearly complete agreement on the big issue under discussion, we differed just a little bit on the details of how this board could accomplish its goal. I tried to explain this to him again and to get him to see the nuances inherent in my departures from his position, but he couldn't hear it. In fact, he cut me off mid-sentence by saying, look, this issue is too important for nuance. You have to pick a side here. Either you're with us or you're against us, he said. There's no middle ground here. Lives are at stake. You either side with the victims or you side with the killers. And with that, he walked away from me and joined another conversation. The next morning, I received a long and private Facebook message from him in which he again expressed his shock and disappointment that in his opinion, I had chosen to side with the cops and that I was unable to show any compassion to the victims of police shooting. He closed by informing me that regretfully he had no choice but to unfriend me. I've learned that life is too short to tolerate and placate people who are part of the problem, he said. I choose instead to surround myself with those who want to be part of the solution. I am surprised that you have turned out to be one of the former instead of one of the latter, as I always had assumed you were. But I am also learning that life is full of surprises, he wrote in closing. So I checked to see, and he had indeed unfriended. And a little while after I had seen this message and he had gotten the little check mark that I had read it, he blocked me as well, depriving me of any opportunity I might have had to respond to him. And just like that, John, who had known me for over 20 years, had known me in multiple progressive contexts, and had been a frequent liker of my many posts about compassion and justice, was gone from my virtual world. His parting impression of me was that I was an uncompassionate, intolerant, right-leaning apologist for the Back the Blue movement, simply because my positions on a few details didn't align with his. And as much as, yes, a part of me was stunned by this turn of events, another part of me really wasn't completely surprised. In recent years, I have had more and more experiences like this one. Conversations in which the other person has adopted a position, dug in, and then sees any departure from absolute agreement as a complete rejection of their entire belief system. At times, it's almost as if we are becoming unable to see any shades of nuance. None at all. It's my guess that all of us here this morning and on Zoom have experienced this phenomena in some way or another, especially in the online virtual world. Intolerance of any position that we don't wholeheartedly agree with, and a self-righteous refusal to look for nuance or to see things from another person's perspective. These things seem to have become a guiding ethos for the times that we live in. You're either with us or you're against us. You're either one of us or you're one of them. You either agree completely or you disagree absolutely. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And this new extremism is harming everyone. Just look at Washington and even Albany, the evidence of that. It's causing rifts in families, misunderstandings or downright arguments among like-minded people, entrenched dysfunction in our political system, and actual physical violence in places like the US Capitol, where people of differing viewpoints used to be able to behave with a basic level of stability in spite of large differences. I think it's getting harder and harder for us to talk honestly and openly with each other about the things that matter most. There is so much risk associated with slipping up or saying one wrong thing or missing the nuance or intention of someone who says something that we disagree with. And the new technology that we all enjoy makes the problem worse. In fact, social media and smartphones that are capable of recording everything that we do and say are likely a big cause of this problem. One poorly worded comment on Facebook or one ambiguously worded tweet, and we can lose careers that we've spent decades building, destroy relationships with friends and relatives that took a lifetime to cultivate, or be labeled as bigots or hate mongers when we are simply trying to add to the conversation. All because, as a society, I think we are losing our ability to see and look for nuance or to tolerate any obstacle to full and complete agreement with everything we do and say. The little echo chambers that we spend more and more of our time inside reinforce the idea that we alone see the world in the only way that makes sense. And we feel ever more entitled to ignore or silence or at times even retaliate against any challenge, no matter how minor, to our sense of preeminent dominion over what passes as acceptable speech and thought. I find myself doing this. There are times when I see a comment on Facebook, or I hear a remark, or a phrase that a person uses in passing, and in spite of my best intentions, it changes the way I regard them. They emigrate from a place of respect in my heart to a limbo of suspicion in my mind, unless I'm really, really vigilant about it. Maybe I didn't know them as well as I thought I did. Perhaps this person is a homophobe or a racist after all, and I'm just slow to be seeing it. I know a woman who stopped speaking to a neighbor because he used to call her young lady. Good morning, young lady. He'd smile at her when he saw her. So this man, who was in his late 70s, had shoveled her driveway, helped her change a flat tire, and had loaned her hammers and screwdrivers when she needed them. I finally had to take a stand, though, she told me. I couldn't continue to be friendly to someone who regularly demeans women the way he does. I asked her to elaborate because I didn't quite see all of the point she was making. Well, she said, the stereotype about women is that we are all vain and that we all want to be seen as young. I'm not young, and he knows that. When he calls me young lady, he is trying to ingratiate himself with me, assuming that his disingenuous flattery is all that he needs to do to get me to like him. It's very misogyny. When I asked her why she didn't simply explain to this man that she didn't like being called young lady and ask him not to call her that anymore, she replied, he's from the South. He'd never get it. Tone deafness is ingrained in that kind of man's psyche. It would be a complete waste of time. And while this example, I'm sure, sounds a bit extreme, who among us hasn't been guilty at least of a thought pattern like that? We like and respect someone until we see a Facebook post we disagree with, or hear a remark out of context, or have one disagreement over something political. And even if we don't cut them off as overtly as John did to me or my friend did with her neighbor, we nonetheless close our hearts at least a little bit to their spirits, and we close our minds to their thoughts. I know I've done it. I've done it many times. Someone has taken a stand on an issue or chosen to vote for a candidate that I don't support, or simply made a remark that offended or hurt me. And I've closed my heart at least a little to them and assigned them a little bit lower rung on my ladder of respect. I used to work with a very kind and caring woman. Lydia was about 10 years older than me, and she had lived most of her life in small towns. A very active churchgoer, Lydia was always talking about the comfort that her Christian faith brought her. And she wasn't a person who simply spouted platitudes either. She put her faith in action. She volunteered at the local food pantry. She knitted scarves for homeless veterans, and she opened her home to disabled adults whose families needed respite care. I never really saw Lydia do anything unkind. Lydia was a person who had an open heart. And then one day, she said something that closed it, at least for a long time anyway. I'm sorry, what I should have said is that she was a person who always had my open heart. But then one day she said something that closed my heart to her. For a long time, I'm sorry to admit. After holding out for many, many years, Lydia finally had the internet installed at her house. And a few weeks later, she told me that she had caught her son looking at pictures of nude women. Of course, I'm not happy about it, she said, but at least I know he's normal. Wow, I thought, what a sideways and subtle way she just put me in my place. As a gay man, I instantly knew what she meant by that comment. A normal boy is interested in women, an abnormal boy is interested in men. That must be what she meant. Catching her son looking at pictures of women had put to rest any fears that she may have had that her son was abnormal like me. She was so relieved about this that she wanted everyone to know that her son was normal. And she wanted me to know that while she might share a cup of coffee with me in the morning or loan me red construction paper and pipe cleaners for a Christmas bulletin board, she most definitely did not view me as normal. I took this remark and I combined it with all of the other things. I combined it in my mind with all of the other things that I knew about Lydia's life. That she lived on a farm outside of Penyan. That she was very active in what I assumed was a right-wing evangelical church. And that her car had a George W. Bush for president sticker on it. Ah, she was one of those people. Part of the problem, not part of the solution. A rural, white, conservative Christian woman who found me and everyone like me to be abnormal. And who would no doubt vote to take my rights away from me if she ever got a chance. And Lydia stayed in that corner of my heart for a long time, for too long. Over the years, though, my picture of her would change. My first surprise was in 2008, when she mentioned that she was voting for Barack Obama. I asked her about the George W. Bush bumper sticker that her car had been sporting since 2000. And she rolled her eyes. Oh, she said, my husband put that on there. I'm a Democrat. Right? A few years later, a lesbian woman came to work with us. And as I got to know her, she mentioned that she and Lydia went to the same church. You do? I asked, trying to hide my astonishment. And then I thought to myself, either this woman hasn't figured out what kind of a church this is, or maybe, just maybe, Lydia doesn't belong in this box that I have put her in. So the latter turned out to be true. I was to learn that Lydia's Christian church was fairly liberal and progressive, had several LGBTQ members, and did outreach to migrant workers. Finally, at the Christmas party that year, with a glass of wine under my belt and an opportunity to speak to Lydia alone in a non-work setting, I mentioned her long ago remark about her son being normal. Before I could explain to her, however, how it made me feel, she cut me off. I remember that, she said, as soon as those words left my mouth. I knew that I shouldn't have said it. It's just one of those things that people say. I had been telling that story for a week and just making that comment offhand each time I told the story without really thinking about it. It didn't occur to me how that would sound to a gay or lesbian person until I said it to you. I should have said something right then to fix things. But I'll be honest with you, I was still working out how I felt at that time. I had been concerned back then that Connor might be gay, and I was still figuring out how I would feel about it if he were. But I never should have gone around making that comment to people. So please accept my very belated apology. Lydia was not at all who I had assumed her to be. Her positions were not exactly the same as mine, that's true, but she was not the intolerant bigot that my mind had made her into either. Human relations are all about nuance. Appreciating and seeing nuance is essential to having a functioning, healthy, and just society. And yet, we are all to some degree, I believe, losing our fluency in it. So much is said these days about how divided we are as a nation. This is true. But this morning, I'm not even talking about the big divisions, the big obvious divisions between the obviously conflicting worldviews, such as those between liberals or conservatives, Democrats or Republicans. Instead, I am talking about what I am seeing as a increasing lack of tolerance for even subtly nuanced differences. Things like the disagreement that happens between two like-minded souls like John and I, who essentially agree in our worldview. Communication these days with Twitter and Facebook and videos and all of those things can be fraught with danger. The possibility of slipping up, making an innocent offhand comment, or presenting a nuanced argument of any kind puts us at risk inadvertently of offending or unintentionally starting a controversy. I will admit, I have grown weary in recent years of saying something from this pulpit that will hurt or offend or upset anyone. And I questioned myself a lot this morning, should I even tell my story about what happened with John or not? Or was I taking too big of a risk by giving any opinions at all about the Police Accountability Board because of this concern that I will upset or hurt or offend someone and cause a rift that can't be repaired? And it is for this reason that I chose this topic for our only in-person service. In case anyone did take offense, I felt like there would be more of a chance to speak to them in real time. But shying away from speaking our truth and refraining from stating our opinions is most definitely not the solution. Instead, my hope this morning is that I will inspire each and every one of you to think more deeply and more carefully about this issue. So think about it for a minute. When have you closed your heart or shut down your mind because you didn't like something that you heard or something that you thought you heard? How often have you relegated someone to a corner of your heart because they expressed a political opinion that wasn't fully aligned with yours? Have you unfriended or hidden anyone you love on Facebook because of a post that rankled you? Have you ever taken a few bits of experience and a dash of background information about someone, as I did with Lydia, and then created a narrative that cast them as the villain in a drama that featured you as the victim? The world is incomprehensibly immense and unimaginably diverse. When you factor in the constraints of human emotion and our egos, and then also consider the brevity of a single lifetime, it's impossible not to see the limitations of a single person's perspective in the grand scheme of things. And while we usually tell ourselves that our self-righteous umbrage in these cases is serving a higher and more noble purpose, if we are to be honest, doesn't it sometimes come down to just a matter of ego? We dwell so constantly and completely with our own thoughts and ideas and feelings that we begin to experience them as objective reality itself. Any challenge at all to this internally experienced reality feels like the most primal violation of the very ground of our being. We are all fundamentally in an inescapable way, we are narcissistic by nature. And we are living in a time that not only encourages us to have these tendencies, but even celebrates them in many cases as virtues. This same culture tells us that resisting these tendencies would be a denial of our birthright. And so we all, even in small ways, act out scenes like the one I had when John was confronted with something less than absolute agreement on everything. Let's all take some time to look around. Our society, our environment, and our peace of mind are all paying a huge price for the desire of billions of individuals to arbitrarily and completely define reality. To define reality itself in terms that gratify the ego and reinforce the sense of self as the sole arbiter of what passes for truth and justice. Our public discourse has never suffered more than it is right now from a lack of the will and the ability to see, appreciate, and grow from the gift of nuance. If we are to have any chance of survival, we must cultivate and practice our ability to appreciate the nuance and the slight variations that each and every person's perspective can bring to the discussion of the many, many urgent problems that we face. We must all, each and every one of us, myself included, become better at really listening without judgment, with minds and hearts as open and compassionate as we can possibly make them. We are all hearing these days about threats to democracy. The democratic process requires all of us to have an ability to focus on the big picture, to see and appreciate nuanced discourse, to negotiate and to compromise, and to show faith and goodwill in human relations. These qualities are needed more than ever right now. And they are needed more than any particular stance on any specific issue. If each and every one of us covenanted together this morning to be agents of goodwill and understanding and compassion, of tolerance, non-judgmentalism, and open-mindedness, we'd be doing more to heal the world than any amount of lobbying for a specific policy or outcome could ever accomplish. We live among essentially kind and decent people. Many are flawed, but few are broken. We are all called to look for the connections and listen for the nuance. And a few weeks ago, I ran into John at the co-op. He came up to me a bit sheepishly and apologized for our falling out. I accepted his apology and gave him a hug. One small disagreement can't undo 20 years of respect. Our final hymn is number 151, I Wish I Knew How. We invite you to sing out joyfully, again creating a collective song from wherever we find ourselves.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all these chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say. Say them loud, say them clear, for the whole world to hear. Say them loud, say them clear, for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. I wish all the stars that still keep us apart. like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing 'cause I know how it feels to be free. Then I'd sing 'cause I know how it feels to be free.
As we extinguish our chalice flame this morning, let us read together the words printed in your order of service or on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. We are still connected in this community, both over Zoom and by being here in this beautiful, beautiful outdoor space together. As we come to a time of closing our service, I want to invite you into an embodied practice of holding hands, both from a distance via Zoom and perhaps in person, but only if you are comfortable with that. So don't feel any pressure. If you are joining us by Zoom, please change your view to gallery view rather than to speaker view, and then reach your hands out to the edge of the screen. For folks here by phone or anyone in person preferring to be socially distant, place your hand over your heart and bring to mind someone you love from this congregation, probably many people you love from the congregation. No matter how weak or how frightened we may feel, we each have gifts that can make a difference in the world. In this coming week, may you do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong, be connected. Each day act so that you may be a little more whole. And let the people of this congregation say together, Amen. As we come to a time to close this service, I invite those of you who are here on Zoom to follow the benediction that I just gave with the words, let us affirm to justice. You can insert them there.
Things have come to a pretty pass. Our romance is growing flat. For you like this and the other, while I like this and that. Goodness knows what the end will be. Oh, I don't know where I'm at. It looks as if we two will never be one. Something must be done. You say either and I say either. You say neither and I say neither. Either, either, neither, neither. Let's call the whole thing off. You like potato and I like potato. You like tomato and I like tomato. Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Let's call the whole thing off. But oh, if we call the whole thing off, then we must part. And oh, if we ever part, then that might break my heart. So if you like pajamas and I like pajamas, I'll wear pajamas and give up pajamas. For we know we need each other, so we better call the calling off. Let's call the whole thing off. You say laughter and I say laughter. You say after and I say after. After, laughter, after. Let's call the whole thing off. But oh, if we call the whole thing off, then we must part. And oh, if we ever part, then that might break my heart. So if you say pajamas, I like pajamas. I'll get pajamas and give up pajamas. For we know we need each other, so we better call the calling off. Let's go.